Because if you are able to lay it out like this and state the business case in these terms and the time well spent, you're going to have a distinct advantage over your competitors. Here we go. What would a conversation be without my host and yours, the man, the myth, the legend, the one, the only, Kenny Sinclair. That's right, folks. Ken Smyers is actually stranded in Mexico without internet connection. So Ken Sinclair has agreed to step in and be the co-host this week. Ken, welcome to the show. Big dog.
Thank you very much. Those are big boots to fill for the Pittsburgh boy. Glad that he's getting some sun, enjoying himself. Lost in Mexico doesn't sound like such a bad idea.
If you got the right tequila and you don't eat the worm, I think you're in pretty good shape. So
right. Sounds good.
Sounds good. Well, listen, Ken, before we, first of all, let's start. You got the August issue has hit the street. It's out. Tell our community about the theme.
Building Whisperers. It's kind of, I think you mentioned it in one of our last podcasts or control talks, I guess we should call them. And it's been a good title. It's created some interest. We're seeing a little bit of interest in the magazine. We're kind of crossing over from talking to traditionally building automation propeller heads and starting to move over to a few IT propeller heads. The other thing we're starting to see is this whole social side of what it is we're doing, which certainly something I don't know much about and I'm struggling with. But
wait a second, man. You got more Twitter followers and more. I mean, you are like the king of social media, man. So, but hey, real quick before we continue on, I want to give our community a little stable datum because those youngsters might not know where the reference, the Building Whisperers, come from. But there was a movie back in the day where I think it was Robert Redford. And the deal was with Robert Redford, they would have these horses that couldn't be tamed or were sick or whatever, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with them. And Robert Redford sort of had the ability to be in tune with them and could, communicate with them, right? And so I think it's a very apt sort of reference, I think, to building automations and sort of where we're going with this whole digital mindfulness thing.
I think so too. I think it's that the touchy-feely side of the building, as I keep saying, and the empathy for the humanity that is inside of the building and the very purpose of the building. So it does require us to dig a little deeper. In the final analysis, as always, we keep talking about all these new things, but in the end, we have to turn the temperature up or down or close the window shade, and we basically have to anticipate, have empathy for what the people in the building want.
No, exactly. Now, this whole thing about, the humanization of the building, if you will, and I'm getting sort of a lot of, comments about, well, what do we do as a systems integrator? What do we do? And how do we do that? But I think it's relevant. I think the deal is that we at Control Trends and you at Building Automation Controls, we sort of track the trends. And the reason we keep bringing this up is this is unavoidable. This is going to happen. And like with every trend that comes about, being aware of it creates a great opportunity, even though we don't necessarily know how that's going to manifest just yet. Not being aware of it means you can be left out.
I agree. I very much agree. And when I first met Lawrence, that was a connection for me of a void in my life. I'm sure I've never been mindfulness, and I think I still struggle to grasp the concepts. So I'm really looking forward to our guest.
Oh yeah. Well, I tell you, before we bring the guest on, Ken, one other thing I wanted to talk about is you've sort of beefed the lineup up at AHR, the AHR Expo that's going to be in Atlanta. Talk a little bit about that. And what you've got lined up and how people can participate.
Okay, great. So we've got Lawrence in one of our sessions. Basically, we're flounder over and take a read at that. This is the part where Ken rustles papers, but I don't have any paper, so I'll have to digitally grab my words here. I hope they come up.
So I think you're being digitally mindful here, Ken. You're doing a great example of, how being mindful and technology come in. Because how they work hand in hand. Because for me, I just gloss over it. I wouldn't deal with the digital part of it at all. So I'm impressed.
Okay. Anyway, so what we've got is this session called Smart Environments for Humans. And it says Ken and Lawrence are going to discuss to succeed at transformation. Instead of making humans more technical, we need to make technology more human. So welcome to Digital Mindfulness, unlocking the value and opportunities of time well spent digital experiences. Current smart environments operate on a machine level and do not understand people. The new paradigm, smart environments can operate on a human level. New technologies, innovation, AI, emotive computing, advances in scientific disciplines, neuroscience, psychology will all will demonstrate this to be possible. As you can see, I'm fumbling with the words, so I'm leaning heavily on Lawrence to make sense of all of that.
Well, I tell you what, speaking of Lawrence is our guest this week. It looks like we got him teed up and ready to go. So Ken, how about introducing our guest this week?
Great. Okay. Okay. First met Lawrence, and he invited me to do an interview on his podcast, and he told me it was all about mindfulness, and I had to admit I was totally mindless. So I did an interview and answered his questions, but of course not really answering his questions from the way he was asking, because I had no idea what it was he was doing. The good news is he lost that interview, and we actually did a retake about a year later, and by then I had a little bit of an idea what he was doing. Again, when I went to Helsinki, Lawrence was there speaking to the crowd, so I actually got to meet him in person, and I was totally impressed. And I want to introduce him to the control trends community, as well as the automated buildings community. So without further ado, here is Lawrence Ampflo.
Hey, Lawrence, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me both. I really appreciate it.
Oh man, I have become a big fan. I'm a big podcast listener. So I've recently discovered through Ken your podcast, Digital Mindfulness, and I got to tell you, it is fantastic. I encourage our community. This is a voice you want to have in your ear as we sort of navigate these waters of digital mindfulness and discover opportunities. So, Lawrence, I'll start with how did you come up with digital mindfulness and the podcast and the website? What got you into that?
It's kind of a long story, but I'll give you the truncated version. So my career is I'm a data scientist and also a political scientist, and my whole job really has been to encourage people to spend more time online and also optimize the time that they would spend online. But I think just in conversation with a few of my colleagues, we started to really think about the question of, where is the literature of basically people spending too much time? And this was when mobile had just started to take off. So this was really about 2011, we started to think about this. And so being an academic myself, I tried to find some literature on this. I tried to find out, who are the voices that are talking meaningfully about if there are any dangers of spending too much time online. And that really was the start of it all. It was a gripe that I had. So I found a few books, found Sherry Turkle's Alone Together, found Nicholas Carr's Atlantic Article, which is The Shallows Now, and a few other books. But I thought that these books were great at setting up the problem that people are spending way more time with Google. We're outsourcing our memories. We're outsourcing our friendships. We don't even remember phone numbers anymore. I understand all of those problems, but I wanted solutions. And so again, I just started to do some more digging around this. And what I found was that people had solutions to these problems, but they were talking in different silos. So the UX people had really interesting results, but they were only talking to their communities. The technology people, they had, the engineers, they had their own solutions to this. The information overload community, they had their own solutions, and they had their own lexicon as well. And so the website, basically Digital Mindfulness, was designed to join up all of those discussions, initially about spending too much time online, but now it's evolved to how can we spend that time in digital environments well? What does that mean? And what I'm finding now I'm in my 4th year of having done this, is that what I'm asking for is not, it's not just a nice to have, and it's not just a simple, it's not just a soft thing. It's actually an economic imperative. And you're finding that now from moves by shareholders, from activist sites, from politicians, but from the big technology companies themselves, that they would call them digital well-being. But you're finding now that, for example, companies now have to really factor in what is that time well spent element to the time that people are going to be spending with my digital artifacts, whether that be an advert, or in this case, stepping into a digitized building. How are people going to spend time well? Because then you go from then having a simple customer that would just be a one-time transaction, to having a relationship, to having a partner, and that person will come back again and again and again. So
Very cool.
That's how I got to today.
Well,
that's the quick answer. You can imagine if you got the other one, the unabridged.
well, I want to ask because I've been very interested in philosophy, and Zen is one of the philosophies I'm very interested in. So when you say mindfulness, that's a Zen or digital, a Zen term. And, and for our community who might not know, and I think everybody knows, throughout the beginning of time, having more stuff, and before the digital revolution, it could be more things, didn't necessarily lead to happiness. So, the whole mindfulness thing is about being present in the moment and being mindful and sort of memorizing the distractions, if you will. So, and I can see where this could apply to the digital world equally, if maybe even not more, Lawrence, because we got so much pulling us digitally. But the mindfulness part of it, did that come from that philosophy?
It's a really good question, and it's something where I think perhaps from a lexicon and branding perspective, people sometimes get a bit confused. But the term mindfulness, what it actually refers to is people focusing on the task that it is that they're doing, or focusing on the present moment without judgment.
Yes.
And when I'm very much a proponent of mindfulness practice and mindfulness meditation. But once I started to take that explanation, and again, a very non-secular explanation, but then apply it to our digital world, I thought, what would my digital present moment look like? And that was in 2011. And it would have been incredibly noisy. So my phone would have been going. I would have had lots of browser windows open. My email notifications would have been interrupting me. And I thought that was a really good starting point to start to think more meaningfully about humanizing digital interactions, or creating these time well spent experiences.
Oh, very, 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 very well said. And I think it was episode 3 with Alex. I'll probably not pronounce his name right, but it was kind of fascinating because you guys were talking about the sort of technology boom. And one of the things he pointed out was that, we've always been dealing with technology since the beginning of time. And a sort of a reassuring note that he had was, we evolved to it, right? That, we tend to evolve to have the technology, but it seems like we're in a period of disruption, at least digitally. I look at my kids and I look at other people. I mean, my wife cannot do anything unless she's got the phone in front of her, or, and this whole social networking and all. So, and I think one of your other guests was talking about, for our community, to give you an example, there's a big thing now to designing attention managing devices, right? So I think this is, again, sort of calling out where the opportunities might be for our community. But speak to both those, if you would.
It's a really interesting point, and I do remember that conversation. That was years ago. But
that was your third episode, dude.
That was right. That was years ago. But talking with Alex about and he believes that that basically people co-evolve with machines, and this is something that Jeff Bezos was talking about in 2007, I believe. But that we create our machines, and then our machines create us. It's that constant co-evolution. But I think it's a really interesting point. But I think it takes away a lot of agency that we have, and it really leaves us a slave to bad design, to bad experiences. That I remember Facebook, and this was years ago, and they really have turned a corner. Just a quick caveat: they really doing excellent work in this space now, in terms of time well spent. But I do remember lots of press releases basically coming that the agents that basically people should regulate their own behavior on Facebook, and people should regulate their own time that they're spending there, that actually Facebook's just a tool and nothing more, when of course that couldn't be further from the truth. And so what we're actually finding now is that because the technology landscape is changing, and actually this harkens back to a paper in 1995 from Mark Weiser, the late Mark Weiser. And he wrote a really influential paper. Happy to send it and share it with you. It's fantastic.
Perfect.
And one of the things that he wrote, basically this was the start of thinking of ambient computing. And he was part of the Xerox Research Park community. And basically what he said was that technology should impact attention the least amount possible. That actually technology should be in the background and support human flourishing, human development, whatever that may mean in a given environment. So again, if we speak about buildings, there are so many elements of human flourishing that technology definitely can support, but at the moment it doesn't, because it's not sensitive to what people want to do. Rather, people have to, as Ken mentioned at the beginning, people have to wrap themselves around the needs of the technology. So if your phone goes, you have to answer it. And it's very difficult to know whether it's spam you're receiving or something very important. It's difficult, again, as Ken mentioned, with, like, say, the air conditioning, to just walk in and understand, like, oh, is this, do I require this? Is this good for me or not? Even, for example, when you ring up and have customer service, it's very common that the bot at the end of the line, or the automated teller at the end of the line, won't know how you feel. So it won't know if you feel frustrated, it won't know if you're anxious, and it can't respond accordingly. But the technology exists, for example, emotion analytics. These exist, and they're perhaps, whilst not completely sophisticated just yet, I think we're starting to think more creatively about how we can, I guess, add value to the digital experiences that we have. And that means it's almost like, again, customer first, it's people first design or thinking. And it's creating this incredible ecosystem of thought, but also startups.
Nice. Ken Sinclair, coming from the building automation side, working with Johnson Controls and sort of watching the trend from the building perspective, the control side, what's the gap here and how do we close it?
I think it's a pretty big gap, and certainly I was pleased when I found the teachings of Dr. Lawrence. It's very important, I think, that our industry tap into this. Our last issue, the Building Whisperer, I started to define that these are the people who have empathy for what's going on in the building, and they basically can bring out the humanistic relationship, and I think that's something we have to work on. The common theme is, of course, is that we have to keep all of this technology in the back. It was kind of interesting, again, as usual, when I start writing an article, I have no idea what it's about until I finish reading it at the end. And what happened here is even when the people started reading it, they put more emphasis on some pieces than I did, and the voice leapt out. And one of the reasons the voice as an interface leapt out was because it doesn't require a device. So this is this helps us, I think, with mindfulness in the fact that anytime we touch a physical device or look at a physical screen, our attention is controlled. So any kind of interaction that we can happen that does not command our attention. And so voice is a typical thing that we're used to talking to people as we walk through our life, asking them to help us open the door, close the door, whatever we do, we're used to that interface. So where I see this kind of going, we had some really good input from Unified Box out of Singapore. They're doing a lot of work in this area, and they're starting to put a lot of voice commands to actually do physical things, open the blind, close the window, those kinds of things. But what's happening is what I think Lawrence is talking about needs to also transform over into the machines. And I'm thinking at this time that next month's issue is going to be mindful machines. And I think that's where we're evolving. So, but I'm still trying to catch up on what Lawrence is really saying. Every time he says something, it's another idea for me.
Well, it is, and I want to eventually cycle around to the business case for this, because at the end of the day, it's the money that drives everything. But Lawrence, and again, on another one of your podcasts I listened to, there was a concept called First in Mind. And I guess my question would be, what's the difference between first in mind and mindfulness?
Yes, it's really interesting with regards to first in mind. So first in mind, what it really refers to, and there are lots of people that are working on the issue of attention, particularly in the workplace and in the education place, so university, schools, etc. But it really relates to where our information, so where our attention is being directed at any one time. And then with regards to first in mind is then what influences or what different inputs might shape that attention, so that something else then comes first in mind. It's a really interesting point because essentially we are in an attention economy. Our attention is monetized, and whenever we do enter into a digitized environment, that is essentially the main thing that's being monetized. With regards to mindfulness now, and again the kind of the aspects where I'm working from, I'm really interested in, okay, that's fine. We've got all of these machines that don't understand me. All they understand are, for example, just pumping out notifications or sounds or noises. They're interested in finishing up that if this then that loop, right? So kind of finishing off that loop. But then what if technology could be designed better? What if our advertising, what if our buildings, what if our social networking experiences, or even our search experiences, what if they could be designed so that they were available and they delivered kind of what I wanted when I wanted them, or what I needed and when I needed them. So I think the example of customer service is really apt. What if when I was calling to complain about something, that a machine could understand not only how I felt, but could understand how to diffuse me, how to diffuse that negative experience. And so it's really interesting Ken was talking about voice, because what we're seeing now is we're moving from simple commands, which actually when you're in an environment with people, yelling at an Alexa is it's not great most of the time. You have to shout above the noise so it can hear you. So everyone just stops and then has to go back. But what you're finding now, particularly, I just saw the Microsoft product roadmap. It's really fascinating. And you're moving now towards conversational AI, basically. So AI is able to understand different brands, the voice of the brand, so how it should be talking to its target customer, and it's able to understand the emotions behind the person speaking to it. And so you're going to be able then to have conversations that don't necessarily take away from the ambience in a room or in an environment. And that's just one example, but I think this is where we're going, kind of almost bringing together that human attention with that mindfulness, those mindfulness properties, understanding where people are, and then wrapping machines around that rather than the other way around.
That's a great response, and actually, I wish Kenny Smyers is here, because, of course, he in his last podcast he discovered voice and was so excited about where that potentially could lead us. Another just add-on to what you added there was we now have the technology to create voice prints. Last time my credit card got compromised, I was chatting with them, and when I finished, they asked if they could take a voice print. And I said, "What's that all about?" And he says, all we want to do is we've recorded your voice, and we have a file, and when you call back next time, we'll compare your voice to that file. It is not the only way that they will validate me, but it at least indicates a trend of who I am. Certainly male, female, those kinds of things. So yes, this voice is an interesting adjunct, and I think it'll get us quicker to mindful relationships than some of our touch screens, phones, things we have to physically act. The other one that came out of Helsinki when you and I were both there was the advantages of a deviceless environment. I took that away from Helsinki and built on it.
Well, Ken, when you came back with the voice thing, I immediately went out and got some Alexas. Lawrence, I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old at home, and it took them all of 2 nanoseconds to pick up on it. And so they interact with Alexa every day. Now, they're sort of learning some bad manners because they don't say please and thank you. So that would be the one advice I give to the voice recognition. If they're small children, they have to say please and thank you, or Alexa says you have to say please. But at the rate they do, and then let's get back to this whole evolution thing, because, there's really not much of a need for my children, especially with Alexa, to need to know how to spell, how to write, how to add, how to do research, because they can just ask. So is there a danger that the next generations are not going to have? I mean, right? The basic knowledges that we do, and is that a potential bad thing, or is it a good thing? Or maybe it's not good or bad. It's not the right question.
It's a really interesting point. I think it's a huge question. First of all, that we might, I think between the three of us, we might scratch the surface, but it's very much a kind of fireside and glass of wine chat. But I think it kind of alludes to a larger question of what skills or jobs might machines displace from humans, and again, is that a bad or a good thing, or what are we going to need to do to get rid of some of the negative impacts of that? One of the really fantastic things that I'm seeing whenever I talk to enterprises and whenever I talk to thought leaders about this, we have had the discussions about universal basic credit, universal basic income. We have had the discussions that actually, for all of our discussions about AI and ML, that actually those technologies are not sophisticated enough yet to displace human beings. Or we've even had like the third type, where you have authors like the MIT professors, Brynjolfsson and McAfee. They say that actually what you need are, don't discount the jobs where machines can't compete with human beings. Things that require a lot of empathy, like caring and nursing, etc. I think from the discussions I've been having, I think the discussion has moved on a bit more, and it is fascinating. So I think that there's going to be, the market now for two things: having people interact properly with these machines is going to be enormous. So people that can basically be the filter between the machines and people is going to be great indeed. So there probably won't come, we're probably not at the stage yet where a bot can take over completely the role of, say, customer service. There's always going to have to be a person involved in that. But knowing that point at which a person has to be involved, again, having the machine interact properly with the customer and also with the human agent This is a really, really important job. And we're seeing this across the entire technology stack, across the enterprise. I'm finding that leaders are less interested in getting rid of the workforce as they are in having the workforce properly interact with the tools so that they can get the best out of both worlds, basically. And I think that that's really fascinating. So the skills that we're going to need, certainly in terms of empathy, courtesy, literacy, etc., you're absolutely right. Those are core skills that we definitely can't lose. Digital literacy is going to be a critical skill. So your children, for example, are going to have to know that whatever they write and share online stays forever.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to comport themselves accordingly, right? Which is very different to when we were growing up. You know, we could say things, we could do things, and they certainly wouldn't be kept forever, right?
Yeah. Okay. The other thing I just want to add at this point, though, is you're defining a whole new breed of person, and for lack of a better description, I want to call them a bot whisperer. And so we basically all need to turn into bot whisperers because we need to do that interface in between. So we're not talking to a horse, we're talking to a bot, and we're talking to people, and somehow we have to kind of create a meaningful relationship between those two things. And I think that's why we're having this discussion on control trends, is all these folks that are watching it that have been deep in technology, like I have. We need to discover you, because we need to understand that we have to change our thoughts, and we have to be more empathetic. We need to be mindful and practice mindfulness.
Well, and I think that the fact of the matter is the genie's out of the bottle. The technology's not going to go away. So I'm going to ask my control trends community, and Lawrence, you and Ken, to indulge me for a minute. I want to wax philosophical here for a minute, right? Because, you know, if you look at what's going on with technology, one definition of technology is you create a machine or whatever that can do the task that took 10 or 15 people to do. Now a machine and one person can do it. So I think the other trend that I'm seeing, and again, I'm getting out there here, okay? So is it, for the first time in history, we've got more supply and have the ability to create more supply of everything with technology than we ever had. So the one thing that might be in jeopardy is jobs might be reduced. So, and I think, but with the supply and everything else, I think we're going to get to the point where there's no reason for anybody on the planet to be hungry, thirsty, or anything else, right? I mean, I think the way we do economics right now is probably standing in the way. But here's the question from a philosophical standpoint. I had a teacher once tell me, if you really want to piss somebody off, solve all their problems for them. And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, people define themselves by their problems. Well, I think people also, I think one of the basic human needs is to struggle for significance, right? And people have significance by having challenging jobs. So if this technology, which I have no doubt is going to happen, is going to continue to evolve in such a way that everything gets easier and easier and easier, to the point that you could probably not have anything consequential you need to be willing to do other than to be nice to people. I'm wondering about the psychological effect it's going to have down the line.
I think that's it. I 100% agree with you. And there are a few podcasts that I've got on my show where we do talk about this very thing. And I think the idea from this is that what you're finding now is that there's a growing discussion in the design community specifically about designing in friction. So the whole technology, the way we design our digital experiences is to remove as much friction as possible so that our journeys are seamless, right? So you kind of glide through Amazon, but what you're finding is that that rhetoric is useful only insofar as we have transactions with things. So if I'm shopping for something, or if I'm, say, voting online, I don't want any friction. I just want to be able to make my choice and then kind of go out, and that's fine. But if I'm interacting with people, and we use the example of Airbnb, having more friction or more contact with other people is perhaps more conducive to empathy, human relationships, communication as well, because then my grammar has to be good, and congeniality, all of these, again, what we might say soft skills, but are critical for a well-functioning society. The Airbnb example is really useful because they were focused initially on having the whole experience be as seamless as possible for the guest and for the host. But what they found was that by measures of time well spent from both the guest and the host, when there was greater friction, so when the host and the guests were kind of moved to ask more questions or to interact with each other more on the journey, then the relationship was strengthened. And both parties ended up having a much better experience.
Nice.
So the trust factor was increased. All of these things which lead to a strengthening of the platform as a whole.
Very well said.
I think there's another concern, this whole, this digital idea that the robots and bots will take over from us is so far from the truth. It's the arena that is developing is the bridge between. And that's what we all have to get involved in. And that's why we're having these kind of discussions, because this is not a bridge technologists have been in, but we need to be in, because we know how these technologies work. We know how we can make them invisible. We don't really understand people, but nobody really does. But there's some people that'll help us know more. And again, let's do it like we do everything. Jump off the cliff and figure out how to fly before we hit bottom.
Well, but Ken, and again, this is a great conversation. I love these kinds of conversations, but I think we got to get to so now you run CB Richard Ellis, or you run one of these big real estate firms, and now, or you're a consulting engineer, because Lawrence keeps bringing up the term design. I mean, what's the business case? I mean, I've got a couple of reasons to argue business case, but Ken, I'd like to hear from you, and Lawrence, I'd like to hear from you. What's the business case? I own some buildings. Why would I invest in this? Or why would I challenge my consulting engineer or my systems integrator to, and how would that look?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ken just handed the ball to you, Lawrence.
Yeah. I want to know, Lawrence. I've got my own ideas, but I want to hear yours first.
Sure. So I think building out the business case for this is something I've really been focused on for like the past, I think this calendar year, I've really been focused on it, because you're absolutely right, Eric. It's nice being able to philosophize about all of this, but actually you need to bring it down to the real world and say, how is this really going to help business? How is this going to incentivize business, so that we can, again, have people, because it can't just be that all of these negative attention hijacking experiences are the only things that create economic value. It can't be. So one of the things that you're actually finding in terms of the business case for this, and I'm going to use the case of Google Play, because they're a huge company and they support lots of small businesses. So this might actually help you. What they were finding is that you might think that, for example, Google's a data company. And they're an online advertising company. So by capturing people's attention in any way possible, that this would be the reason for being for Google. And so to have all of the different products, etc., do this would be the most optimal way of increasing revenue. What you're actually finding, though, is that when people realize now when their attention is being hijacked, and people realize they realize much more acutely when they have a negative experience. They know when their time is not well spent, when they're just scrolling through Facebook or scrolling through Instagram. With buildings, digitized buildings, people realize when they don't have a good experience there, a good digitized experience. And so what you're finding is that when people have negative experiences, they leave that app. So the app usage decreases sharply over time if they have a negative experience. Or in terms of an ad experience, people will skip ads or leave that platform. So basically, if people have a negative experience, then you lose subscribers, you lose customers, you lose users. It's the worst experience possible. So then by incentivizing designers or incentivizing engineers to really understand what is a time well spent experience for your consumer at in your particular industry, and the ways that people are doing this are by data. So by using, for example, in the case of Google, the app usage data, social media data, the way people are responding and behaving and talking about their different experiences, you can actively create these time well spent experiences, so that people, when they have a meaningful humanized experience within an app, they will use the application more. People will be less likely to migrate to iOS, where the environment is much more closed, and so it's more, the time it takes to develop these experiences on iOS is longer because it's got to go through a longer approval process. And then people will stay with Google within their ecosystem. So it was a really interesting discussion that I've been having with the teams there, because it's almost like this virtuous loop, that if we incentivize designers and, I don't know, ad creators more to really fervently understand users, to understand what time well spent is, then it creates a better ecosystem. We make more money, developers make more money, users have a better experience.
And you have significance in your life again.
Yeah, great. I'm glad I tossed it over to you to start with, because that's a great introduction. And actually, what my question to you was going to be is, in our industry, the adage is if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And I was trying to think in my mind as we were talking, how do we quantify, qualify mindfulness? And in your discussion there, you basically gave the answer is the success of our bots and in our devices, and the rating of friction created or not created will be the rating of our success of the implementation of mindfulness. Does that sort of make sense?
It absolutely does. And I think what's interesting now, we're at a point in this very moment, much more so than when we all started talking about this years ago, that we're able to just gather many more data points about people, so that we can kind of get to almost that single point of truth, where we do understand how people are, from an attentional perspective, from a cognitive load perspective, from an emotion perspective, all of these different data points, so that we can deliver these time well spent experiences more regularly.
You got to figure business owners is competitive like everything else, right? I mean, they got competition. I think as people work more from home, you're going to have to create an experience. The time well spent, which I love that. I'm going to nail that down to call it a great experience. Okay. And I'm going to go as far out on a limb as to say that I'm wondering culturally, both given the millennials and just, the fact, I think maybe we put like a Maslow's hierarchy thing, right? And for our listeners who may or may not know this, some of you learned in in high school or whatever, that, you basically start with the basic human needs. People got to eat, they got to, be protected. And once they get that, then they can go to the next thing on the hierarchy, which maybe is learning. But then I think the highest one we've gotten so far, at least that I'm aware of, is self-actualization, which I'm improving myself. And I'm wondering whether we're hitting the spot where it's going to be the time well spent, or the time well actualized is going to be the next level up on the hierarchy. And if so, if you're not delivering that experience to your tenants, they're not going to want to lease your space. Thoughts on that comment?
I absolutely think so. Or rather, I think that people will just naturally gravitate towards the places that they have better experiences in, those environments that are more intuitive to their needs, or that foster, for example, more pleasant accidental collisions with the people that they should be communicating with, or whatever. I think you're right with the business case. It's just fascinating. So obviously there's the moral case that it's wrong to insert things like dark patterns or to hijack people's attention, etc. But also you're having it from a top-down perspective. So again, the big tech platforms are really starting to mandate, like Facebook, for example, where they prioritize connections between friends and family over those with publishers. They're really starting to crack down now on publishers and say you have to deliver experiences that people, the same types of experiences that people would have with their friends and family, because that's why people come to Facebook, or that's why people come to Google to search for things that they need in their lives. And I really started to think about this with a few of my friends who are economists or data scientists, etc. And what we came up with is that, and here's, I think, the real business case. I think the business case is attention. So once people have that self-actualized experience, people, again, in the literature, it's really likened to flow, that flow state by Csikszentmihalyi. And what flow is that incredibly heightened state of attention where everything else falls away and you're only focused on that thing that you're trying to do. So whether that is running, whether that's writing, whether that's coding, whatever that is. And I think that once you have a person who's imagine having an actualized experience in Facebook, well, then that makes you a prime advertising candidate. Or if you're in a WeWork building and you're having these incredible time well spent experiences there, then you'd never leave WeWork. You're the perfect customer. And I think that's the difference between having a casual user and a relationship, having a relationship with that person, or a casual customer or a partner saying, I use WeWork, or I'm going to that building, or I use Facebook because it supports me in connecting meaningfully with the people I want to connect with. So I really think and if you have those kinds of people there, having those experiences from an advertiser perspective, or from a revenue generation perspective, these types of people, this is the holy grail, essentially, of customer relations.
Well, I think it is. And of course, with social media, and Ken, this gets to your point earlier with social media. I mean, if they're having a bad experience, the world knows about it. I mean, instantaneously. So, when it comes time to renew your lease, I mean, if you're a savvy leaser for your employers, you're paying attention to that feedback. And Ken, let's talk about some of the variables that we can control. I mean, one of them, it goes back to even when you and I first got started in the business, which is got to have the temperature right to have a great experience. But Ken, in your experience, what are some other variables that you're seeing that our listeners can hone in on to create this effect?
Okay, just before I go into that, I want to just also address the business case. One of the evolving business cases is the attraction of talent. And I think you and I talked about that in our discussion on digital mindfulness. But this is becoming very important. For the really good people, they want to come into an environment like this that has all of these mindfulness. They don't want to have a lot of friction. They want to be attracted to it. And I think we just had this post from WeWork of our good friend Lindsay Baker, who is from Comfy and has gone on to WeWork and is head of sustainability and well-being. Even the title suggests a whole new thing. And I think if you read through that, there's all these good words. But if you understand, I think the reason why that was put there, the main reason and all the effort that WeWork is putting into that is to attract better talent, more talent. And that is probably a bigger business case than anything. So what's happening with us as an industry, we're moving into realms where we've never provided value before. And I think that's complex for us because we're technologists. We install this stuff and make the temperature go up and down, and that's what we do. But we've never kind of got into this human side of it. We've seen the curves, and we know that that's the big number in the buildings, but we're getting closer to having a reaction on that.
Well, I think we are. And Lawrence, one thing that's really encouraging in our industry, the real estate people came up with this metric, which is they call it the $330-$300 rule, which they came up with it. For every square foot they build, they're spending rough stuff in it, and $300 for the employees that are in there. So affecting their productivity is, the savvy real estate people are now sort of tuned into that, which is, I think, gets right into your time well spent. Because that has got to have a profound effect on productivity. And I think for our community, the people that listen to us, the systems integrators, the consulting engineers and all, I think Lawrence and Ken are providing us with the vocabulary where you can have a differentiating conversation with your customer. Because if you are able to lay it out like this and state the business case in these terms and the time well spent, you're going to have a distinct advantage over your competitors. And I think, Ken, it comes back to some of the stuff that's coming into our industry, the the building analytics, the integration of lights and the temperature. I mean, the term well-being, Lawrence, is coming into our building now. We've got the first well building that has everything's controlled. The air quality is perfect. All the snacks are healthy, things like that, which I think fall right into what you're talking about.
The other thing I'd like to point out is we've got this great opportunity coming up in January in Atlanta when Lawrence is coming, and we've got a whole session that he's going to be available. You'll be able to come up and touch his magic ring, right?
Nice.
And become mindful. And I think it's an experience you want to be part of. I very much enjoyed his presentation in Helsinki. He's promised to give us pretty much that. I've promised that I will interrupt him several times to get discussions like we've just been having here, because I found them more intriguing. I found his presentations is amazing. You need to go through it to kind of get the sense of what he's about. But then as soon as you understand it, then you've got a bunch of questions, and he best answers those questions just as he has on this podcast. Whoops, I guess it's video.
Well, and podcasts, we do both.
Yeah.
So good stuff. So Lawrence, if you're going to be in Atlanta, I'd like to extend an invitation to you. That Sunday night before, we have something called the Control Trends Awards, which all the major players in our industry will be there. It's a good time. We come together, we celebrate, we eat, drink, we be merry, and then Ken Sinclair usually puts somebody in the Hall of Fame. So if you're available, we'd love to have you as our guest at the Control Trends Awards.
Oh, thank you. I'd love to come.
Awesome.
If you got nobody better to sit with, you can sit with me, and I'll try and introduce you to a few folks in the industry.
He's sitting with me. What are you talking about?
Okay.
So Lawrence, this is it's so great to talk to you, because I think that things start with theory. They start with research. They start with theory. You come up with a premise, and then you sort of course adjust. But I think. I see a huge future in our industry, sort of understanding your concepts and creating this great experience.
I think I'm really, really lucky. Like I kind of started this a little while ago. There have been people who've been thinking, I'm really standing on the shoulders of giants. There are people who've been thinking about this since the 80s, since we've had computers, certainly personal computers. But I think that the scope of its application is so huge, and I think this might be a little bit hyperbolic, but really we're really thinking about changing design frameworks, changing business models as well. It's almost like a new level of value creation here, and the great thing is that it really integrates both people and the tools that we create as well.
It's such a timely conversation, and I love looking out in the future. Now, rumor has it that you spent some time in Buenos Aires. Is that true?
I did, yeah. I lived there. I lived there for a little while, yeah.
Did you dance in the Argentine tango?
No, my dancing abilities are strictly English.
Oh no!
I wasn't very good at that.
Well,
oh no!
Listen, mine are suspect at best, but I noticed you and I have the same haircut, those perfect heads. So I got to tell a quick story here. I was dancing Argentine tango in Atlanta, and Argentine tango is kind of a very controversial dance, because the man or the leader typically stands very, very straight, and the reason being because he has they used to have a dagger in their back, right? And so it would either lead, and the dances would either wind up with bloodshed or sex. There wasn't much in between, and it was actually outlawed for many years. But so I studied in Atlanta and was going to Buenos Aires for the International Argentine Tango Festival. And the dance is full of nuance, and we were schooled religiously. You do this, you don't do this. And one of the things is you don't ask somebody to dance. You sort of look across the room at them. If they look at you and then blink twice, you can go ask them. If they blink 3 times, you better start running, because their boyfriend's getting ready to kill you. So it's like all these rules. So we arrive in Buenos Aires. We go to the first Milonga, which is the big dance, right? And the place is packed, right? And you can hardly move. And I kind of, some of my courage, and I look over at this beautiful Argentinian woman, and she gives me the right cue. I wind up dancing with her. And the dance floor was literally so crowded, guys, that, I mean, we moved maybe 4 steps the whole time, but she was so present and was such a beautiful dance. It was just the most incredible experience. I mean, it was pure art, pure magic, pure poetry. But I do my 3 dances with her, you know, because you do 3 dances at a time. Go back and sit down, and after my heart stops beating fast, I go over to the bar to get a beer, and I said, I'm going to try this again. And so I'm looking out across the thing, and I see this girl, and I sort of give her the eye, and she looks at me kind of funny, and then I kind of look away. I look at her again. She gives me the eye. And next thing I know, she's up walking towards me. And I'm not prepared for this, but I figured this is very bad news because everything's supposed to be very subtle. And she walked up and she says, excuse me, you're trying to ask me to dance. I said, yeah. I couldn't tell because the light was bouncing off your head in the reflection. I couldn't make out. So I love Buenos Aires. Was it a good experience for you living there, Lawrence?
Oh my gosh. Life-changing experience living there. Absolutely incredible place.
How many years were you down there?
It was just under a year, but the whole experience has shaped everything I do now. So yeah,
cool.
absolutely fascinating place.
Well, you and I will have to do another podcast, and we'll talk about tango steaks in Argentina or something.
This might be a cue point, but I was just wondering, what's the automated buildings industry like, say, in Latin America or the Spanish-speaking world?
Fragmented, very fragmented. It's like the country. It's
right.
I too have been to Buenos, but didn't dance and just as a tourist. But it's an exciting, interesting place. But we actually have ones and twosies, readers and stuff from almost all of the South American countries. They're starved for information, starved for products, starved for concepts. That being said, there's Sao Paulo is starting to generate a bit of a tech bunch, and haven't seen too much from Buenos. It doesn't seem to be too much of a technology thing, but it's just early days for them, and it's from our look at the industry, it's fairly fragmented.
Yeah. Europe's different, though. Europe and Asia are completely different. A company, one of the major players in our industry now, a newer player actually, is a company called EasyIO, and they have a global conference every year in like Madrid, Paris, or whatever. And it's fascinating, Ken. I mean, you ought to come to that. Both you guys ought to come to that. I think they're doing it in Italy next year. So, but what's amazed me about that is how the integrators from around the world, with the exception of Latin America, although Mexico is playing pretty hot and heavy now.
Yeah, Mexico's strong.
But how much we have in common and the nuances from the individual countries. So it's
There's actually an AHR show in Mexico. Don't have the date right off the top of my head, but it's every year they have they run a Mexico show as well as a North American show.
Okay, so I got another question for you guys. So let's imagine it's 5 years from now. We're doing our 5th podcast together. Ken, everything has gone in the automated buildings world the way you predicted and expected. So walk our audience through how a building is going to look 5 years from now in terms of controls and interfaces. And I'll ask you the same question in a minute, Lawrence. But given that Ken's the old goat that built the chiller.
Yeah. God, I'm not even sure going to be here in 5 years. But anyway, no, I don't know. I think I think the patterns have been set for sure. Actually, you mentioned when you introduced me the Johnson controls. When I left Johnson, it was almost pneumatic times, T6000s and JC80s. So it was pretty crude technologies back in those days. The future, it's definitely going to move towards the devices not being obvious, and what I think that's why we're having this discussion is we've got to create a relationship with machines that is invisible, and they have to be mindful. They have to react to us, and this is going to develop faster than any of us can imagine because of the bot technology, because we've crossed the floor and we're no longer in isolation as we all have been all of our lives. We've been a specialized industry. We are no longer a specialized industry. we're now part of the IoT industry, and whatever they do, we're going to be part of it. And so therefore we have to understand, why Lawrence is working for Google and why Google is interested in working with Lawrence. Those kinds of things we need to understand. We need to start putting this stuff into our products. Voice is not going to be the only interface. Video analytics, we didn't touch on that. We could do another session completely on that. The information that we can extract from video with AI, that's going to roll out. And in the mechanical room, there'll be pneumatic actuators still moving the dampers and electric switches turning stuff on and off. Probably that part is not going to change that much. So for all the people in the industry that think they're going to be replaced by a robot that's going to go out and do that stuff, think again. You're still going to have to make it work. And the only other thing is, because you're part of the building emotion, when it doesn't work, the building are going to have an emotional hissy fit, and they're going to come and find you and drag you out there to fix this stuff. So
nice. So Lawrence, I'll rephrase the question a little bit for you. Let's imagine it's 5 years from now, and just describe your ideal working space. You're working in a space, and these are your requirements.
Wow. So I think in the next 5 years, in my working space, in the background, I'll be listening to news, and that news will be of a major company that's going through a lawsuit on one element of their digital artifacts that has negatively impacted people's time or their attention, and that was done knowingly so. Nice. So one of the things I talk about a lot is I think there's going to be a need for what we, in the same way that companies pivoted towards, or rather included, corporate social responsibility. They realized their social footprint in the late 90s with, no logo and globalization, etc. I think that now people are being aware of the attentional and health, well-being, time impacts of our technologies, and how these technologies, they don't exist in a vacuum. Like, we meaningfully create these things. I think that companies are going to be bought. I think you're going to have digital responsibility officers, corporate digital responsibility officers that are going to be responsible for the quality of the artifacts that companies produce. And that's going to incorporate a skill set like law, psychology, ethics. It's going to incorporate all of that. They're going to have to know that. So that's what I'll be listening to in the background. In terms of buildings, I think the buildings will be virtual as well as physical. So I do think virtual reality is going to play a really big part in my building experience. And particularly, I think buildings are going to enable me to be closer to people, and the people I need to be closer to with regards to my job or my personality type at a given point of time. That's something I'm really looking forward to as well, because at the moment, certainly big metropolitan cities, there are millions of people there. Urbanization is increasing the pace, but there are lots of people that are genuinely lonely. And I think buildings have a real opportunity to be differentiators in bringing the right people together. So what if we could be, what if, I don't know, my phone or my device, whatever it is that I'm working, could direct me to the right person that would help me to have that moment, that light bulb moment. That's something I'm thinking that would be particularly useful. But
a whole new thing. There's synergy and that. I mean, maybe just based on the data things, it's like, Lawrence, you're working on this problem. Here are 3 people we can direct you to that would have complementary skill sets. Boy, talk about some productivity.
And not only that, these people are, in terms of personality type, they most likely work well with you.
Yes. Oh, that's. Well,
sorry. This is great though. The big point you made that I completely missed is the virtual reality building. I love that, and it's not so hard for us to imagine it as we're sitting here in Atlanta, London, and the west coast of Canada. We're talking, and we've actually created a virtual building on our screen here, and we're starting to see the start of that. We're also with, of course, WeWork, and my daughter works for Shopify, and so she her whole day is spent on Zoom, and she has sometimes hundreds of windows open with a meeting kind of thing. So it's all kind of coming together a lot quicker. That's an excellent point that I completely forgot, and thank you for reminding me.
Well, I have one of my, Ken Sinclair's always said you need to take a millennial to lunch. I have a millennial buddy, and I got two really sources. I got one guy is the first guy I ever worked for, so he's in his 70s now, and he's a voracious reader. And I got my young friend Anthony. So whatever they're reading, I call him once a month, and I go read it or whatever they're watching, so I get a perspective. But Anthony is really big into virtual reality, and his belief. He says the virtual reality people believe that it's literally going to be with the virtual reality. You're going to put the glasses on. That's going to be the platform. You never have to leave. You'll do everything from your virtual reality glasses, which seems a bit extreme, but he says people are definitely talking about that, and they want to build that. That's what they want to build. So who knows?
Actually, that's interesting. I just moved my virtual reality mask from the side of my chair up to my desk, which has all of my electronic things from the last 10, 15 years that didn't work. It starts with an Atari, so you can kind of understand how much my electronic museum is. I don't know if I can lift my laptop high enough so you can actually see it here behind me on my desk. But anyway, so all those devices back there are little palm things and all those technologies that didn't work out.
Yeah, the
so I
technical
just
term for
moved
that
the
is
virtual reality mask up. So I'm thinking the problem is we do not like devices. We don't like headphones.
right.
We don't like anything that touches us. We want to be free.
I've already signed up for the chip they put in your brain. That's how I'm going to interface with everything. It's going to make me a lot smarter. Lawrence, tell our community a little bit about your services that you provide and how people would engage you if they were interested.
So they've really evolved over time as well. And sorry, Eric, just to your last point, I think the last thing I wanted to say is that I think it's really important to ask, like, actually, are we going to be happier
It's a great
in
question.
in these new digitized environments? So you're right. There's going to be so much more stuff. Ken, you were saying there's going to be, we don't naturally want more devices. We don't want to buy more iPhones, but there's going to be more stuff. But I think really, are we going to be happier? Are we going to be spending our time well with each other? Are we going to be not? Are we not going to? It's not that are we going to produce more? We're going to be more productive, but are we going to be like? Is our productivity going to be better? Are we going to be able to connect with the right people, etc.? And I think this is something right now we're uniquely able. We're at a really good point to be able to solve these questions, and I think that's probably not what a lot of companies are really thinking about now.
I think that's brilliant, Lawrence. And if we don't build in happiness, I know I do a lot of sales, and one of the questions I always ask is, what has to happen for you to make a decision and feel really good about it? What has to happen for us to design this so that we're happier? If we don't put the happiness in the equation, it will get swept under the rug.
Yeah, okay. My thought on this is that this is a philosophy of mine for the creation of Sinclair Energy Services, the creation of automated buildings. Basically, you want to live where you want to play. So you go where you want to play, then you create your life backwards from where you're happy, your happy place. So you're basically everywhere your happy place is, that's where I want to be. When I get off this call, I'm going for a bike ride at 2:00. This call canceled my kayaking trip to an outer island because we didn't have enough time. So there you are. You're cutting into my happiness, but you guys make me happy too. But that is the situation, I think, is that instant gratification that once we leave the virtual office, we are where we want to be, doing what it is we want to do. And I think that's how we're going to be happier. But I think we also find the challenge and the intrigue of being able to globally connect with people and have bigger ideas than we've ever had before.
And then the first control vendor that comes out with a happy control, remember that Lawrence has that name trademark. So happy control, you're going to have to talk to him before you use it. But Lawrence, again, tell us how our community gets hold of you. I would encourage you to check out his website and his podcast.
Oh, thanks very much, Eric. So get in touch with me by email. It's hello@digitalmindfulness.net. If you come to digitalmindfulness.net, the website, there's loads and loads of resources and ways that we can connect. So there are events that we hold on this very topic, how we can create time well spent digital experiences. but then also in terms of the other ways that I work with people, I also speak to companies as well, and who, the people that basically create digitized or digital artifacts. How can we create these for time well spent? So really looking forward to hearing from you if you want to connect with me.
Fantastic. Well, listen, Lawrence, hope we can get you back on the show again. That's it, folks. Another week on Control Talk Now, your smart buildings videocast and podcast. Special thanks to our guest, Ken Sinclair, automatedbuildings.com. The August issue is out. Check it out. And Lawrence, man, thank you so much. What a pleasure meeting you. Appreciate you taking the time to touch in with us. As always, we appreciate our community. Remember, be bold, stay in control, stay relevant, and make sure you spend some time well spent this week.
Be mindful.
Thank you.
Well done, guys. Lawrence, that was amazing. I loved it. Have a fun.